allegation that the couple had not complied with church standards. According to a committee planner, the wedding had cost more than 1 million shillings. David Mbithi, KTN News.
Bummer for that couple. Now, we wish them the best going forward. To that conversation I told you about, today we are focusing on building bridges. Everyone here in Kenya at least remembers the 9th of March, that surprise handshake between President Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. This following what had been an acrimonious, toxic political landscape. So at the very least, it was welcome for toning down that very negative rhetoric. They came out, they decided, they said they buried the hatchet. But other than that, they announced 9 areas they deem important to be able to ensure these bridges are truly built. And I want us to run through some of them. We'll just put them up on the screen for you. So ethnic antagonism is one of those. They said in their 9-point agenda, the issues that need to be ironed out. You see there lack of national ethos, inclusivity, strengthening of devolution, and divisive elections. And then you have the other 4, ensure safety and security, and corruption, ensure shared prosperity, responsibility, and rights as well. So the 9 agendas that they will be considering, and that's the Building Bridges Task Force. And tonight I'm with one of the joint secretaries, that's Ambassador Martin Kimani, Joint Secretary, Presidential Task Force on Building Bridges to Unity. We'll also be showing you some of the other members. It's a 14-member team. He's Joint Secretary with Paul Kimani. Did I get that right?
Mwangi.
Paul Mwangi. Yes, I thought something sounded off. So keep your questions coming. Many of you have tweeted in your questions, so keep them coming, and we'll put them to Ambassador. Thank you so much, and welcome to Checkpoint.
Thank you, Sophia.
So 9th of March, that handshake, the joint communique was a surprise for everybody else. But I wonder for you, because it was following that press conference that you also announced as joint secretaries with Paul Mwangi, it couldn't have come as a surprise as well to you. You must have known, and I wonder at what point you did, if you can share.
Well, I can't go into a lot of the details, but I did know for some time before March the 9th. And these 2 leaders had been in discussions for some time, and those discussions culminated in the handshake. So I had known of the discussions for some weeks before the handshake.
Were you present in those discussions? Or was it just the 2 of them? Were some of their aides around?
It was a very, very private process between the 2 of them. And I think they've explained to the country how they came up with it. They needed to start somewhere. And they wanted to start a national conversation. But they knew that they had to take responsibility and start the conversation themselves. So it was never just going to be the 2 of them, but it was going to be the 2 of them beginning a conversation that the rest of the country was then going to have the courage and the confidence to take up.
Yeah. Why you to joint chair this? You announced, you and Mwangi at the time. Yeah. What do you think qualifies you to spearhead a process that many look at, some with a lot of skepticism, some with hope?
I actually have very little idea about that, and I'm sure there are many other people who are much more qualified than I am. But by chance and on the basis of whatever discussions we're having, they decided that it was going to be me and Paul. And it was and continues to be a big responsibility.
Yes.
And I felt very honored and also very intimidated by it.
Do you think the team is inclusive? If we have those names, we can put them up, the 14 of you, because this is dealing and seeking to canvass issues that have affected the country. Do you think it is an inclusive team, inclusivity being one of the issues you're going to be looking into?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that we were charged with working to identify individuals who had the experience and the wisdom to offer advice. So it is inclusive first in terms of its regional mix of, and not just ethnicity, but where people live, the careers they've pursued, and the careers they're still pursuing, their life experiences. And so it was not an attempt to to get tokenism, if you see what I mean. It was rather an attempt to really try and find a balance between experience, profession, and wisdom. And you will see that the task force leans towards slightly elderly
Yeah, which I was
members.
going to ask you, because at the time there was concern
Yeah,
of
yeah.
where are the youth, don't they have a voice in where Kenya is going?
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and I think we understood the points from young people very, very well. And the idea was that we have come from somewhere. If you look at the joint communique that came out on March 9th, it starts by recognizing the journey we've come from. The 55 years since independence, the more than a century since we were colonized and brought together into a strange amalgamation that later became Kenya. And so there was an attempt to find people who remembered, as Kenyans like to say, when the rain to beat us, because there was a need to reflect deeply on where we came from. Not to exclude young people, but rather for the people who've come up in this country to take responsibility for the country that they've created. And then as we move forward, there are going to be many initiatives that are going to include young people, and especially in terms of how we consult with Kenyans.
Yes, because the concern, and you talk about people who were there and can pretty much teach a history class on Kenya and tell you this is what happened. But this is also looking at where we are and where we are going. And a lot, we have 70% of our population being under 35. That's significant. So you have a lot of these people not being on the table, because it could be that these people know the things that happened, but this 30-year-old, 25-year-old, or however old knows how these things have affected them and perhaps would have a voice. So wouldn't there be now a consideration to expand and include young people?
Well, we're going to be, the task force is going to be listening extremely closely to young people, and already has been doing that. And there's not going to be the illusion of a youth agenda or of youth perspectives. As for the issue of expanding it, I haven't heard any plans for that to happen, but neither is it a closed case at all. But this is a task gazetted, so it has to work out through its gazettement agenda and mandate. And there's nothing that stops more advice going to these advisors, to these two leaders.
Yeah.
And the thing I think that many Kenyans, there are many initiatives going on right now in Kenya. And a lot of the initiatives are trying to offer advice all the way from the county level to the national level. So the Bridges Task Force is not to replace the very vibrant conversations Kenyans are having. It is merely to add one voice, one level of advice to the government, to the president, and he's taking advice from multiple places. So it does not exclude, no one is excluded from having a conversation with the president or with the Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Yeah.
This is just one initiative.
One initiative. One initiative that a woman has moved to court arguing that it is not anchored on the Constitution, asking under what law was it formed, and taxpayers' money as well is going to fund your operations. So that's a matter that will be canvassed. But what do you respond to that kind of an assertion?
Well, let me not respond on the legality of these issues, but let me respond to the concerns. And Kenyans are right to be concerned about the use of their resources, about the use of public money. The government has multiple task forces, stretching from what to do about the coffee sector, the sugar sector, public health. And that is because the government is mandated by the Constitution itself to listen to Kenyans and to raise the level of public participation and public listening. And these task forces all attempt to bring together wisdom and knowledge in a variety of ways. And so this is a task force, like other task forces. It is not, none of these task forces, task force on coffee is not trying to replace the Ministry of Agriculture, nor is it trying to replace any committee on agriculture in Parliament. It is a collection of experts on the coffee industry offering advice that may be taken or not by the government. And so the task force is not here to replace any legally or constitutionally mandated body.
Right.
It is here to add some advice into the mix. And of course, very few people today can say that Kenyans don't need advice. And indeed, I think a lot of Kenyans were very excited on March 9th. The handshake on March 9th was not mandated in law. It was not a constitutional process. It was a political process. It was a show of leadership. And that show of leadership continues to have an appetite, not only to drive themselves, but to listen to others.
Okay. All right. I want us to talk more about what has happened since that handshake, 9th of March. Gazetting of this team was done 31st of May, if I'm not wrong. You held your first public hearing just the last week, and one would ask a question around the pace of how things are moving. Those are several months we didn't hear anything, know what's happening, and almost shrouded in secrecy, quote unquote, or not understanding why is the pace so slow. Yeah.
Well, yes, correct. It was gazetted on the 31st of May.
Okay.
And the first public hearing was this past Friday. And that is quite a bit of time. In that time, what we were trying to do was, one, to absorb that joint communique and the issues that are in it, to unpack them, as people like to say. We also had quite a number of consultations with experts, and as a team, we tried to get into the flesh of what we'd been asked to do. There were delays that were occasioned by the fact that by the time it was being gazetted on the 31st of May, we were deep in that end of the financial cycle. And so the budget making process, so there was a lot of complications with how that was going to work, which did contribute some delay to the process. But I don't think, look back at the months that we've had, the conversations and the analysis that we've had, and then look at the highly structured and very, very positive meetings on Friday, I think it's going to be a fantastic effort. And from now on, we're now going to go out into the counties, and we're going to travel around the country, and we're going to listen to a lot of Kenyans.
Yeah. So you had Nairobi, and talk to us about how that meeting went for those who did not manage to see or be part of. How is it structured? How is it you're going to conduct these sittings? Can anyone from the streets walk in, come and tell you, hey, this is what I think? Or are you structuring it to listen to entities or individuals?
So on Friday was the first but not the last meeting that we're going to have here in Nairobi.
Right.
And we're going to have two kinds of meeting generally. Very structured ones by invitation, especially to institutions. And then second ones that are open to the public who can come in as they may and speak to us, or speak to the advisors, to be more exact. So on Friday, we spoke to the Supreme Council of Kenyan Muslims, to the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, to the Kenya Chamber of Commerce.
The presentation?
Yes, and what they did was all these groups, there was a County Governance Watch and the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. And what these groups did is they met as a group, and engaged with this 9-point agenda and gave their input into what they thought is the most important way to approach these 9 points, and also which other points that may have been left out in the joint communique.
Yeah, because I was going to ask that already this process, talking of inclusivity, those 9-point agendas, Kenyans were not involved in formulating, because perhaps somebody else may think another issue should be on the table, should be what is being submitted on, so that wasn't that limiting. So you're opening it up. When people come, they can speak beyond these 9 issues.
That is correct. I mean, this is, the 9 points are indicative of what His Excellency the President and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga were thinking were the main issues that had divided Kenyans. But of course, I've even heard many very smart Kenyans say, what about this 10th or 12th issue? Or to me, it's only one issue. So the people who come to speak to us, we ask them to come engage with these issues, but feel very free to come up with whatever contributions they think will make sense for our country.
Yeah. I want to bring a question to your attention before we go on a quick break. Quite a number of people have been sending in. There's one just coming in now. Marigiri is saying, will you collect views from Kenyans in all 47 counties?
Yes. We are not going to travel county by county, but we've divided the country into regions, and we're going to make sure that there's representation and public meetings that are reachable by most Kenyans.
How many regions?
We're going to go to 7 or 8 regions. And the next one from here is going to be Eastern, Upper and Lower Eastern, by going to Machakos and Kitui. We're not going to go every single inch of the country, but we're going to have, basically we're going to canvass the whole country, but using several stops rather than going everywhere.
Are you open to receiving feedback from Kenyans via email, or is it just an old school, let's sit down, come talk to us? Are you being more open and keeping with technology and to be able to bring in more people, not necessarily that face-to-face?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, write to us, bbi@citizensupport.go.ke. Let me repeat that, bbi@citizensupport.go.ke.
Yes.
And we're receiving petitions there. We're also receiving petitions at Kenyatta International, KICC, where there's a desk that receives petitions from the public. And already a lot of Kenyans have been writing into us.
Yeah. So the question arises, once you receive all this, you'll have a period of 1 year from May 31st, or where did the 1 year begin?
It started on May 31st.
On May 31st.
Yeah.
So after you've collected views, and I imagine there'll be varying views, how is it then you sort of like amalgamate and sift through all of that as members, so that if, say, we are both members, you don't think this is the way to go, I think this is the way to go, do you take a vote, majority minority decision, and do Kenyans get to know who thought what? How will that work?
Well, one of the things we did, and we took some time to try and do some team building and draw up some rules of engagement of how will we actually engage with the public. And the first thing is that this team had to see and not as a political team, even though there are very political people in it. And what we are looking for is the boldest ideas, the ideas that have sometimes not been heard of as much. And in meeting His Excellency the President and the Right Honorable Raila and other leaders as well, what has been very clear is people want to listen to Kenya and they want bold solutions. And because they think that the experience we had last year is an experience Kenyans should never repeat again as a country. And so that's going to take some very bold thinking. Within the team, we want it to be a matter of consensus. And the team right now has been characterized by a spirit of togetherness. And so there's not been the issue of we may disagree. We know that may happen, but we will be very much guided by seeking consensus.
As we go to break, you talk about bold decisions, but there's a concern about this team being used as a tool. For instance, we've had the former Prime Minister pronounce himself that if the task force comes and tells us to have a referendum, we will definitely have a referendum. And he said it on several occasions. That has made people think, okay, so is this just a rubber stamp? So we have a team so that it can come back and tell us what the political class wants to happen? What do you tell those people who are concerned about the independence? And how do you even isolate yourself, yet such a political process and engagement still you're having, but from that interference and some form of independence?
Ms. Sophia, that's an excellent question. Let me start by saying I think most Kenyans are in awe of the leadership that they saw on March 9th, because we had seen where we had gone to before that. Extremely divisive. The things that we were saying about each other and to each other were dangerous and very negative. And so by these two leaders coming together and starting this national conversation was an extremely bold step they took. Many of their supporters were surprised at that step that they took. And so the solutions they're seeking are equally bold. Is a task force a tool? It's not. I think it's the people, the advisors are all eminent men and women. These are people who have long experience in leadership. They lead major institutions and have led major institutions. So they're not going to be used as a rubber stamp or just to be an unwitting tool to anyone.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we return, I'll read more of your feedback that you've been sending, and very appreciative that you're taking the time to do that. We'll continue with this conversation, including interrogation of that